Welcome to the Success Pick and Mix podcast. I'm your host, Nicky Raby, a professional pick and mixer. I'm a personal brand coach, a speaker, an actor, a creator, and a podcaster. I'm on a mission to help you find and create your version of success. Your pick and mix of life and business on your terms. A blend that complements your personality, your goals, and your circumstances. Since 2018, I've been sharing interviews and mini episodes to help you unlock your next step, to make it real and make it happen. Round here, we dream big. We go for the ideal version. We talk about money and make moves our future selves would be proud of. This podcast is free and available for you whenever you need it. So do rate, review, and subscribe for new episodes. If you want to go deeper with my support, check out my freebies house and unlock the rooms you choose. nickyraby.com/freebies house. I also have workshops, programs, and one-on-one bespoke offerings. For prices and availability, go to nickyraby.com. Thank you, as always, for spending some time with me and my guests. Now, on to today's episode. In today's episode, I'm talking to Blyth, who is a journalist, writer, editor, and a mother. Her new book, Enjoy Time, is all about how being busy is bad for us, especially the cult of busyness. She argues that in order to get more done and enjoy your time more, especially as a mum, you need to slow down and monotask rather than multitask. Oh, this feels so prevalent right now as we're all trying to do all of the things, often all at the same time. There's loads of information in this episode, so grab a piece of paper and a pen and also join in the conversation over on Instagram. I know it will spark some thoughts. I talk about this a lot in my weekly magazine about time and productivity and how we can work smarter rather than harder so we make time for more of what we love. So if you're not subscribed, it's free. Come over nickyraby.com/magazine and you'll receive the next one when it launches and drops on the following Monday. I hope you enjoyed the episode. Let me know what you think of the book if you read it, and here it is. Hi, Catherine. Welcome to the podcast.
Good morning.
Good morning. Good morning. What do you do? How would you describe your job and your career at this current time?
The jokey answer is that I feel like a freelance words floozy sometimes, but that's not really what I should say. I'm the author of several books. The latest one's just come out called Enjoy Time. And I also do some editing occasionally, and I've helped people write their memoirs, so bits and bobs. And there is, of course, the novel sitting gathering dust at the bottom of the drawer somewhere.
When did you start writing that? About 1998?
Well, no, I mean, there are various things that I'm going to go back to. You know, I'm letting them mulch like a good compost. They're getting more nutritious by the day. No, I suppose my main job is writing about ideas and aspects of life today and how things really work. I got into the subject of time because after I'd had my children, I was desperate to get cracking on another project. But of course, I had about 10 different dreams that I'd come up with, and I couldn't work out what to commit to. And I got into this terrible state of panic because suddenly time felt so precious. There was so little of it, and I was so tired that I realised I wouldn't have that much flexibility. What could I do? And I got more and more obsessed with why I felt I had no time, because in many ways I had loads. And it just got me thinking, and I wanted to understand more. And that led me on a journey through the weirdness, not just the kind of Stephen Hawking version of time, which is very interesting, but more the muddy foothills of everyday experience. Why does time feel fast when we're happy and slow when we're sad? What is it that makes us rush, and how does that affect our perceptions? So the neuroscience, the psychology, and the practical aspects, you know, what is it that's going on inside you when it's late at night and you just can't sleep, and then you get into a kind of panic mode? Why is it that you can get more done in the morning and you operate differently when you feel there's a deadline bearing down on you? The more I understood about these things, the more fascinating it was and the more useful I thought. So yes. That was the reason I plumped for that as my book.
And certainly as a parent, you never see more of the day in those first few months than you've ever seen before. You know, even your late night partying days, you know, I just felt like, why am I seeing 21 hours of this 24-hour period? Because it's just, yeah, it's relentless.
Yes.
Well,
if you pop your eyelids open.
Well, quite, exactly. How did the book process sort of start for you with this one? How did you begin to formulate your ideas and really get clear on what it was going to be about?
So Enjoy Time is actually the second time I've approached the topic of time. So On Time was the book, the first book. And again, it really was a process of elimination, having all these different subjects, but being so obsessed with time and not wasting it. I just read and read and read so many different subjects and fiction as well, because there are universals of temporal experience and the science. It was just an obsessive rummage. And then I started distilling ideas for a book proposal. Non-fiction, so books about ideas or biographies, it's a much easier kind of project to sell to a publisher in a way than fiction, because you can do a proposal a bit like a business plan when you're looking for an investor. So you can actually draw up your manifesto, the big idea, and then you can break it down and do little summaries of every chapter that you think you'll delve into, and then you do a sample chapter. So you can invest in the idea to a certain extent, so you're taking a risk there, but your literary agent will give you the feedback and say whether or not they think it's going to work or how you might sculpt it. And then you go out there and you get publishers competing to buy it. So from the investment point of view, because one of the considerations for me was, given I had so much less time and how important work was to me, but so too was being as present as I could for my children, and I needed to know that the project that I was investing my time in was going to be one that would actually have an end result.
Yes.
Where it's sitting down for 5 years to write 3 hours a day, a novel, and then potentially not to get a publisher for it. That wasn't a very palatable thing. So I think your confidence, when you've been through a big transition as a mother, you know, your confidence is a bit shaky. You're not quite sure that you can be the same person again. And you don't want to be. You are someone new. You may look the same on the outside, but your heart's been rewired and plugged into a small, helpless human being. You're all over the place. So it was very important to me to know that the project I was going to spend time on was personally useful, because I needed to understand, had a real value for other people, because I don't know anyone who doesn't have problems with time or isn't interested in making it work better. And it seemed very of the moment. And then just knowing that there would be an end result, I would get there.
And also with that proposal, you know, you're fixing a problem. You're not just sort of saying, well, it all begins in, you know, cloudy Cornwall or wherever, that it's very much like, this is what I can do and this is the solution that I can find. And as soon as you're able to sort of state that, then it's much easier for somebody to understand.
Well, it's a purposeful exercise, and non-fiction of this kind is sort of, you can read lots of fascinating stuff. It was a great excuse to delve around in corners of the academic universe that I wouldn't otherwise know about. But I was coming at it from a user-friendly point of view. I wasn't going to promulgate a thesis or one single answer, which a lot of non-fiction books do, which I think can be a bit dishonest, because they have to oversimplify everything to say that, yes, I've got the answers. Whereas I was saying, well, what are the problems? What are the issues? There are so many different aspects of time, from enjoyment, stress, and the body, to more interesting things like how we are manipulated and the price of technology. It just allowed me to have a massive rummage, but there was an element of discipline, because I then had to make sure that the research led to some solutions. It wasn't just about celebrating problems, but it was seeing, are there ways out? And what I found so pleasing was that actually some very simple habit-based changes can have a transformative effect. We think that we're a procrastinator or that we're useless with time. And once you get into that mindset, it does formulate your sense of self. It can have a very deep effect, but if you make a small practical change and things move differently, your self-perception, your confidence, your expectations and your efficacy can change. So I realised it was one of those things that we all know about, but we're not necessarily talking about. And I don't know, I was inspired.
Well, I think that it's such a pleasantry now. It's part of hey, how are you? Yeah, I'm fine. I'm just really running around, or I'm so busy. And we almost enjoy this sense of I'm so busy, I'm so stressed, I'm dashing here, there and everywhere, instead of actually going, hi, how are you? What is actually going on? Because all of that can sometimes be fluff to conceal the problem that's actually kicking around underneath.
Or yes, or you're addicted to the feeling of busyness, the feeling of rushing, because it is compelling. And stress, people complain about it, but it also gives you a kick and it can be quite useful. But you can get addicted to a kind of behavior patterns that are actually very self-defeating. I mean, a lot of us, we say we're busy, and then if you break it down, I mean, it's hilarious the amount of time we waste, or that leaks from us in distracted behavior or interrupted, multitasking, the single most inefficient way of approaching life. I mean, an awful lot of time spent on media devices, or sort of keeping in touch with people in kind of indirect ways, but never really seeing them or having a meaningful conversation. People are quite dispersed and quite not dishonest, but deluded about what they're really doing. If you actually sit back and measure it, and you'll know this from your work, what are they actually getting done? Yeah. What constitutes a busy day? Is it just lots of incomplete beginnings of thoughts of things that then leave you feeling terribly stressed, but you really haven't got anywhere?
Yeah, that sense of, life is so hectic, or, just kind of not being deliberate with how you're spending that time and what you're actually working on. I do it with my clients all the time when people say, I just want to earn more money, or I just want to feel better about things, or like my business is growing, and actually getting really specific of what does that actually mean though? How will you know when you've got there? What does it look like? And what were some of the
story to what they're doing, rather than just kind of vague aspiration?
Exactly. And well, I mean, the old thing in the 90s or the 80s was, I just want to be famous. And then, the reality TV generation came out, and I was like, oh, but not that kind of famous. Thank you. I don't want to be on Big Brother or something.
I think is the word. If we wanted to be celebrated for doing something really well, then I wouldn't have any problem with that idea.
Yeah, for sure.
Meaningful time. One of the things that struck me was just how very easy it is to get yourself out of that panicked, hurried mindset by, building 10 minutes in to do absolutely nothing. The impulse to fill every second and to be constantly accelerating ahead in your mind to what you need to do next. If you can just crack those little tendencies, your whole sense of accomplishment in time can change.
Yeah. How did you approach the book writing process, or how do you approach any kind of sort of writing in that sort of, do you write a certain amount a day, or are there certain times where what is your process?
Well, it depends on what stage you're at. So if I'm underway and I've got my groundwork and I know what the structure is and what I need to accomplish, and all the research is done, then or if I'm dabbling writing fiction, then I would definitely set myself a word target. I think the most important thing for me is to have a clear mind and a regular start. I'd love to be like Trollope, who managed to write something like 1,500 words in 45 minutes before going off to do a full day's work at the post office. Wow. But that's not who I am. But if I could get 1,000 words done being at my desk from say 9 o'clock, then that would be a great day. But the kind of, most of the time you're not actually in that zone. Most of the time you're editing, you're gathering, or you're restructuring, and then so you'll then have to have different yardsticks for success. So rather than making it about achieving a number, I'm trying to make it about having had a good, clear chunk of time. And my mornings are the most important times. I'm clearest, and I've got the energy levels. A big battle for these two books, really. So I think of them as a partnership, on time and enjoy time. a very big battle for me was making my afternoon time work harder and be clearer. And so often I found it was more effective to be editing in that portion of the day. But you can still get little spurts done. Beating the mid-afternoon slump. That's also a big... My answer for that, I'm not sure it was such a good idea, but it was quite tasty. I got really into my dark chocolate. So I don't drink coffee with caffeine in, but chocolate obviously has caffeine in too. So I would allow myself that little kick. And that definitely helped me anchor myself to the desk.
Yeah. I guess, me too, a big fan of it. Because so many people are navigating this portfolio career at the moment of every day is different and the spontaneity of the week and all that being very exciting. But it does mean that throughout the day we're all wearing different hats, and then throw in maybe parenting or looking after elderly parents or just being a kind of human in the world. Our plates get very full.
It's very easy to be ineffective when you're trying to operate on multiple frequencies, and the thing to do is to separate them out. So I try to be quite disciplined about the boundaries of the day. You do not want to be open to your emails and WhatsApp when you're trying to do some focused work. Being savvy to when you get your focused work done is great, and trying to have quite a rigid sense of which times belong to which job. I think is to protect that. The more you can get some kind of rhythm and you can feel there's a kind of momentum behind what you're doing, that you're actually getting somewhere.
Yes,
the better.
Definitely. And really... And knowing when your energy is really high and what that kind of requires. Because if I ever have to do any sort of, something serious, there's a book called Eat That Frog, and they always say that you should eat the ugliest frog first. And if you've got two, you eat both of them.
Willpower. So that was a really interesting aspect of my book, and the relationship between your motivation, your pace, and your willpower is quite important. You need to do everything you can to not overuse your willpower. So getting things that replenish it, feelings of achievement, not being distracted by itty bitty things, avoiding stress. Your willpower and motivation is strongest in the morning, and that's the ideal time to kind of lock the door and tackle that hard thing. And once you've got through that hard thing, have a break, reward yourself, and then that feeling of accomplishment will help you to carry on. As you get later in the day, your attention span shrinks, and it's harder to keep rebooting your willpower. But after a snack, your willpower is better, or after a break, it's always better. There was a very well-known study, I'm sure you know, about the judges in Israel, the probation officers.
Yes.
Heard this one where when people coming up for probation in jails, you are far more likely to get them to agree to release you early if they saw you at the beginning of the day or straight after a meal or a snack. But almost no one would get their probation approved just before lunch because they were knackered and grumpy. So, if that's a judge supposedly following objectively the letter of the law, what hope do we have? You just have to be wise to the limitations. So I like to do itty bitty tasks in the afternoon, and it's easier to kind of hop from one thing to another. But be aware that that's not your best time to do some serious analysis or come up with a brilliant new idea. If you are in idea generating mode, of course, breaking midway through a task and sort of not trying to think about it, going and doing some exercise or having a walk or just relaxing with a friend, or when you're in the shower, you'll suddenly get the answer bobbing up.
Yes.
Your brain's default system is kind of working overtime while you're not consciously on the task. So while I think it's really good from a stress minimization point of view to finish a task in a given time, and then you can mentally clear the decks and you feel good. If you are tackling something that's a bit more difficult or requires creativity, stopping halfway through allows your brain to continue ruminating. So you can trick yourself into having sort of more imaginative approaches. if you play around with that. Like some writers say, Graham Greene, I think, always used to stop at his day's work halfway through a sentence, because that meant that the thread was somehow still open. But if he got to the end of the sentence, it would be much harder for him to pick up where he'd left off the next day.
Oh, brilliant. And sometimes it's that first easy win of building momentum, of going, oh, I know what I'm doing. And it's great. It's really interesting sort of throwing in creativity into the mix, because, you know, both of my parents were very hard workers. They really put in the hours and all of that. And once I sort of really cottoned on that actually a lot of my work is not just ticking the task off the list and getting it done and churning it out, that requires that extra creativity and that sort of different headspace. It took me a long time. I mean, I probably burnt out a little bit, that I realized that I actually needed to add in time away from my desk as well to top up that side of creativity and ideas generation. Yeah. Have you found that with your writing process?
Well, I mean, that's one of the key themes of my book, really. What does time pressure do to your thinking and your outlook and your mental process? And what it does is it can drive you into what's known as a cognitive tunnel. So say you've got a deadline bearing down on you, there's a clock ticking in the corner. At that moment, you will be more focused to your end goal, but at a sacrifice to your creativity. So if you're under time pressure, you're much more likely to reach for kind of received ideas. You know, you'll just do what you've done before. You'll only think about what's necessary to get to the end of the task. But if you want to be more creative, to originate a different approach, you need to get yourself out of that time pressured space. So it's not just a question of thinking, right, I need to go and have more fun because that'll make me more playful and imaginative, although that's definitely true. But creating situations where it's not about time pressure, that you have a kind of more relaxed mindset, that allows you to think more broadly.
Yeah,
using time pressure wisely is one of the key messages of Enjoy Time. You know, it's useful to get a job done, but you need to have that space during your process before you reach that point. You need to manage the time pressure in such a way that it keeps you pushing forward at your best level. Sometimes reflex responses and fixed ideas are absolutely fine. You don't necessarily need a high level of creativity, as you say, but if that is what's required, you need to make sure that you can find a working method that allows you to be relaxed and consider all the angles without worrying constantly about when you've got to finish and what you've got to do next.
Yeah, when we finally got some childcare, which was a glorious, glorious day, I used to just put such pressure on myself to achieve something in every single minute. And actually, I had to stop myself in my tracks and going, no, of course, do the early drop off, but then take that time to at least move or go for a run or something, and not immediately dash back to your desk and go, quick.
I think it's vital. So there is this amazing psychological fact which makes perfect sense, which is an hour feels less disposable to us the more we are paid for it. So the richer you are, the more likely you are to feel time poor, because you know what you're giving away by taking an hour to not work. That costs you £100 an hour rather than £6.95 or whatever. And it's similar when you're paying for childcare. I had this sensation, and that's one of the reasons I got obsessed with the subject. I knew that every minute that I wasn't with my child, I was paying someone else to look after them. So I was paying double. I was paying not having time with my child, which I felt a little bit guilty about, and also, having to pay someone else. So suddenly the pressure was really on. But if you want to kind of reset and get out of that mindset, I think it's really very powerful to do this small thing a friend of mine does. So she has, perhaps like you and me, a pretty frenetic morning routine, getting people out of the house, and everyone has to be in a certain place. And you feel like you've run up a mountain once you're finally alone.
And you're trying to be that easy breezy mummy, but equally you're like, come on, get out the house.
I don't think I paused enough to think about that. But then what she always does is she makes sure that she has some time to do something that is entirely unnecessary and entirely pleasurable. So before she goes into work, she'll always go and have a coffee. She'll be by herself or with a friend. She'll have a book, she'll read, and she'll do it for at least 15 minutes. It's not that much time, but it allows her to feel completely in command of her time and what she's doing. She's not chasing after the clock or the to-do list. She's just doing something she wants to do. And that shifts her emotional, mental space. I mean, another example in my book, Enjoy Time, is this American psychologist, Robert Levine, or he might call himself a sociologist, but he did a sabbatical in Brazil, having been in a North American university situation where everyone works incredibly hard, long hours. But in Brazil, they have a slightly different approach to time, and people would always be late, and it was a given that you wouldn't do things on time, and they had a much more magisterial approach. You know, they'd take their own time. Thank you very much. Now, when he came back to America, he didn't feel that he could go around being 3 hours late for every meeting, but he wanted to have some of that feeling of ownership and that magisterial control of his own time, rather than this commodity you have to chop into ever smaller pieces. So as he was looking at his schedule, he introduced a new rule that rather than just saying yes to everything, he would really ask himself, do I want to do that? And quite often the answer was yes, and he still had a pretty busy schedule. But because he was thinking hard about whether or not he wanted to do it, somehow it all felt different. He was controlling his time rather than feeling his time was being taken away. It's a small mental shift, but I think it can have quite a profound difference.
Definitely. How do you talk about how people can measure how effective their time is? So is there a way that you can give yourself the pat on the back or the sticker chart, go if you were 6 years old, saying, yes, I'm on it and I'm making my time work for me?
Well, I think that it's quite interesting that when we feel we own our time or the time's passed well, we're not really thinking about time at all. I mean, motivation research is quite interesting. All the carrot stick idea of getting stuff done, that we do our jobs for the bonus or the prize or the recognition. In fact, it's found that the more you reward people for what they're doing, the less likely they are to enjoy it for itself. So any secondary incentive or reward depletes your pleasure. There's this Harvard study recently which was looking at people's subjective emotions and how much they were focusing on tasks, and mind wandering, which everyone does, is kind of inimical to enjoyment. People were happiest not when they were lounging around in the sunbed or whatever, you know, you might think would be the most happy making thing. People were generally happiest when their mind was completely occupied by what they were doing. I mean, I'm sure familiar with the research about flow and all the rest.
Yeah.
I'm going off on a slight tangent, but to rope back to your question about rewarding yourself for time, I think if you're looking to build a day in which what you are doing, you are focusing almost all your attention on doing it as you're doing it, it's something you've chosen to do, that you feel in charge of, that you're not distracted by a million other things, and you're not constantly having to leave things half done. If you can manage your time in a way that it feels like you're being effective and you're really engaged with what you're doing, then it becomes both more productive and more pleasurable. But the main task I think we all face now, because there are no limits to what we could be doing, to how accessible we are, there are no boundaries. We really have to manage our boundaries well, and we don't want that to become another stressful task. So the more we can kind of automate productive use of time in our habits without having to think about them, but planning our days in an effective way, making sure that we're giving proper space between each task, having a real break, having a real lunch. The more we can accomplish that, the more likely we are to feel that we are gaining momentum, that we're motivated, and that we're rested.
Absolutely.
I think the trick is to not fill every second with itty-bitty rubbish stuff where we don't have any tangible sense of accomplishment, and our mind is never fully on what we're doing, and then we get forgetful and chaotic, and we end up procrastinating.
And doing those things that we feel we ought to do. Well, we've always done those things. And certainly when you get into your 30s and your 40s, you get invited to lots of things, you know, weddings or whatever, or so-and-so's getting married. And you're like, well, I've only met this person once. I don't feel like I can go to Spain to celebrate them for 6 days because I might not recognize them at the airport.
Well, but as you get older, and if you do have quite a lot of things to try and get done, it's easier to start saying no to stuff. You care less.
Yeah,
I found it easier anyway. Well, definitely the demands have grown. The flip side of that is it's easier to see what is absolutely essential. I mean, Tessa Jowell, you know, the late Tessa Jowell,
yes,
the politician, she was a working mum, pretty busy life when she was in government, and she had some terrible dilemma where she was meant to be giving a big speech, the minister, and it was her daughter's school play. And she just didn't know what to do. And she was talking to Alistair Darling. Do you remember him?
Yes.
And he said, you know, the question is, where are you irreplaceable? Where do you actually, what really matters most? Can you be replaceable? Just go with where you're irreplaceable. I don't know. I think having a firm hand on your priorities and what's going to give you the pleasure you need for today, but help you in the longer term. If you can be more shrewd rather than reactive and getting trapped into saying yes to things because you're sort of so frenetic that you feel like if you don't, you'll be shutting doors to yourself.
Exactly.
I don't know.
There was a great thing that Dolly Alderton said about don't feel like you have to go to every party that you're invited to because nobody will really miss you. And actually what you could do is just send a bottle of champagne and be that mysterious person like, oh, where are they? Who are they? And what are they all about? And
or you do what Anna Wintour does and just turn up for 20 minutes.
Yeah.
I mean, it depends on who you are. I think it's a phase of life thing. I've just moved to a new city. Children are at a new school. I'm got a completely different pattern of my family life because my husband's working in where we used to be. So just trying to make all the right choices for all of us at the moment is quite time consuming. But yes, I'm more likely to say yes to things now because I'm at the research stage of this new phase of life. But I also know that I'm going to say no a lot more often in 6 months' time.
Definitely. What surprised you about your research and pulling this book together? Because, you know, things change all the time. My mum is still very cautious about nuts because of the calories, and now people are whipping up nut butters left, right and centre and saying it's great. But what did you kind of expect to find, and maybe how it was different?
That's a really good question, and I'm going to think. I'm going to take a moment to think. What wasn't what I expected? I suppose it's just the detail of things that you may feel you know, but then actually how come? And then the facts are there. So I've always known that when I'm having a fun time, suddenly I'll look up and 6 hours have gone by and the party's over and you sort of feel terribly sad
yes.
that you had this wonderful time, but you haven't kind of nailed it down. You can't take it home in your pocket and keep it because it's just gone. But then when you're looking back at that fun time you had, you can remember it and you can remember all sorts of things. So it goes really fast when you're having it, and then afterwards it's quite slow. There's a lot to remember, whereas if you're really desperately bored or you're feeling low, time just crawls by and you can stare at the clock, willing it to go faster, and it just gets slower and slower. But when you look back at those times, there's not much to remember. It's just a kind of long expanse of grey. Yeah. So while I knew that, and people have made observations about that for thousands of years, I should think, and you can find poetry that refers to it, when you know that part of that's to do with dopamine and the kind of memories you form and how your attention operates, it was just really fascinating to me. I loved learning that our sense of what the moment now lasts about 3 seconds, and how curious, what a coincidence, or perhaps not, that 3 seconds is the span of between a breath, and it also happens to be the length of a line in iambic pentameter. None of this stuff necessarily makes me use my time differently, but I just found it quite thrilling to think there are these deep universal things about being a human being that affect our experience. And what else shocked me? I was interested to read more about the body clock and how that operates, and the incredibly bad effects of trying to muck about with it. We really should, talking about shoulds and oughts, if we could possibly manage it, it would be very much better for all human beings if we rose with the sun and went to bed with the sun.
Yes.
Not with what we're being pushed to encourage, and technology. People are sleeping less. We sleep a lot less since TV became part of our lives, and even less now. But the long-term effect on our metabolism, and by extension our immune system, it's just shocking. So when I read about what happens to the brains of people who work in airlines, who are bending their body clock out of shape, it's just horrendous. They've got prematurely aged brains. They're more likely to have diabetes, cancer. It's a long list.
Wow.
And while you and I are not flying in aeroplanes on a daily basis, I hope.
Not yet.
No, but that's the extreme end of it. But what price are we all paying for the kind of 24/7 non-stop party world that we could potentially be operating in? There is a point in going to bed early. It's not a new thing, but there's value to it. And now I understand the impact of those things and what it really means to have a kebab at 3 a.m. Don't do that every day either. Things like that, it was quite powerful.
And that pressure as well, we touched on it before we started recording, that pressure of trying to launch a business when you're a new parent, when actually your body clock and your hormones are probably so far at the other end of the spectrum to normality. I'm using quotations there, but it's not the best time to do all of those things, because you're fighting against your body trying to reset itself.
Yes, this is true. On the other hand, and this is what excites me on a kind of, these are the things that make you feel very positive. Changing habits, that feels like the hardest thing in the world. But when you're at a transition in your life, and having a baby is obviously a huge one, it's much easier to shift your habits and to get your life in a new direction. I mean, just thinking about time a lot reinforced me the things we all know. Time is not money. Time is your life. It's the medium of your life. It's not transferable. Use it for you. You don't need to sell it or give it away. Use your time how you want to, because you only get one shot at this life. Yeah. And but on a day-to-day level, if you want your dreams to come true, it really is as simple as just coming up with a decent plan that's realistic, putting as few goals on that plan as possible, preferably one, and then lots of sub-goals, and then just, eating the elephant one bite at a time by setting up your daily life in a realistic way that allows you to do what needs to be done. When you've had a massive shift and you've got a child suddenly and you realise that you're on this one-way journey through life and it's a voyage, and you're getting older and they're getting older and you've got stuff to do, it can refocus everything. And maybe that is a good moment to think about the big picture. You have got less time to do the things you want to do. So what are they really? And set your course.
And what are they, those times where you're sitting in a chair, you're pacing the floor or whatever, it's actually quite a exposing type place, because you're not having the distractions, or you're not sort of wandering to the other end of the office and going, yes, but I hate it, but they do have lovely snacks. You're very much sort of seeing and breathing it and being at one with yourself. You have to sort of check in with it, otherwise it will show up in a different way.
Yeah, I mean, we live in a world where increasingly there's a tendency to have second-hand experiences, to consume our notions of what a good life is. A lot of activities, so-called hobbies, are passive, not creative. You're sitting around, you're just staring at stuff, and it's hypnotic and addictive. I mean, I knew that technology is addictive, but again, going back to surprises from this book, the dopamine kind of loop that locks you into constantly checking your email or your feed or whatever and splinters your attention, it's like crack. It's no accident that these Silicon Valley entrepreneurs will not let their children anywhere near smartphones and iPads. Yeah. They're happy to sell it to the rest of us, but, our splintered attention, as you say, it's not very comfortable or normal in most people's daily lives to have a confrontation where it's just you thinking about what you want. But when you're up all night with a baby and your mind's kind of wandering in that exhausted, dreamlike way, maybe you are going to make those discoveries about yourself and what you want and what you can do. And then when you've had a bit more rest, you can start making a plan. I definitely feel like there's a liberation in knowing that there are only so many days left, because then it concentrates your mind.
Yes. Yeah, I love that. And, when those scary ages pop up that you're like, oh, I thought I would have done that by now. And then actually you can make quite quick progress when you put your mind to something and you can crack on. I've got one final question for you, which is, where would you like to be in 5 years' time, in business or in life, or a combination of the two?
Well, I think that I want to find a different format for some of the ideas and materials. So I'm going to explore whether I can be, properly embracing technology and whether there is something for me to do in that space about time, possibly in an academic learning format. So, I just worked, and one of my first books was about conversation. I was involved with the launch of an app. It wasn't designed by me, but they wanted me to be the spokesperson, and it begged the question, well, why didn't I devise something like that? I could have done. So I'm going to have a think about that, and I also want to make sure that I carve out writing space which is purely fiction, so to kind of have a bit more of a separation in my writing life between the ideas side and the fiction side, which of course is full of ideas, but it's a different thing. So I'm going to have my work cut out to do that and to enjoy all the important, irretrievable, joyful moments ahead as my children go from gorgeous, peach-skinned little darlings to bristly teenagers.
Yeah, I had a brief moment the other day when I was dancing in the kitchen, and my almost 3-year-old went, "Mummy, no," and I was just like, "Oh God, it started already." I thought this would come later.
Dancing, your mum dancing.
I was swinging my hips. If people want to come and find out more and read the book, of course, where should they go?
So please. Read my book. It's called Enjoy Time, and it's published by White Lion. The subtitle is Stop Rushing, Get More Done, which is very bossy and I guess instructive. So the format of that book is there are lessons and there are solutions. So it's not just thinking about problems, but trying to show how we can leverage the knowledge to make our lives better. On Time, which is a thicker book, which goes into broader issues culturally as well. So there's lots of information as well as advice. And anything written by Catherine Blyth.
It's all amazing.
It's all there. Go onto Amazon and even go to a local bookshop. I love local bookshops. They need our support, so check it out.
They really do. Brilliant. Well, thank you so much. I have a clear day tomorrow, actually. Tomorrow is a nursery day, so I'm just going to be thinking about now, getting excited about how I can start my day in a good way, but it will definitely be fueled by caffeine, that is for sure. But thank you so much for your time today. I've loved chatting.
Thank you.
Thanks so much for listening to today's episode. If you haven't already, feel free to rate, review and subscribe for all the brand new episodes. If you want to go deeper with my support, check out my freebies house and unlock the rooms you choose. NickyRaby.com/freebies house. I also have workshops, programs, and one-on-one bespoke offerings. For prices, availability, or just to have a chat with me, go to nickyraby.com. Thank you, as always, for spending some time with me and my guests, and I'll see you next time.